What if the quiet man you walked past was the one who saved your life, and you never even knew? On a cold morning in a big city, a movie crew was busy on a street. Cameras were rolling, lights were shining, and people were rushing around. In the middle of all this noise, a tall man in a black coat walked quietly to his mark. It was Keanu Reeves. Everyone knew him as a famous movie star. People loved his action films, his calm voice, and his gentle smile. But that day, something else was about to happen. Something no one would see on camera. Something that would never be in the script. Between takes, the crew rested. Some actors checked their phones. Others went to drink coffee or chat. Keanu, however, liked to wander around the set. He talked to the workers, the extras, the guards. He listened more than he spoke. Near the snack table, he heard a soft sniffle. A young woman was standing there, wearing a crew jacket. Her hands were shaking as she tried to pour herself some tea. Her eyes were red, and she kept wiping them with the sleeve of her coat. Keanu noticed the way she tried to hide her tears, turning her face away whenever someone passed by. He stepped closer, gentle and careful. "Hey," he said quietly, "are you okay?" The woman jumped a little. She had not expected the famous actor to talk to her. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "I'm fine," she answered. "Really? Just tired." Keanu didn't push. He just nodded and handed her a napkin. "If you ever want to talk," he said softly, "I'm a good listener." She looked at him, surprised by his kindness. For a moment, she thought about keeping everything inside. But sometimes, when your heart is too full, the words slip out on their own. "My brother is in the hospital," she whispered. "He has cancer. He's only 10. Keanu stayed quiet, but his eyes changed. They softened and grew sad. He listened as she spoke, the busy film set fading into the background. That was the moment everything started. And no one around them had any idea how far it would go. How many hidden tears can live behind one quiet smile? The young woman's name was Emily. She worked on the set helping with costumes. It was not a big job, but she was proud of it. Her little brother, Jake, loved to hear her movie stories. He used to laugh and say, "One day I'll visit your set and meet a real movie star." Now Jake was stuck in a hospital bed. As Emily talked, her words came in little pieces. She told Keanu how Jake's hair had fallen out, how he tried to be brave and call himself bald superhero. She told him about the long nights, the beeping machines, the pale faces of other children in the cancer ward. Keanu listened carefully. He didn't look away. He didn't glance at his phone or his watch. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes kind and focused. "Is he getting the treatment he needs?" Keanu asked. Emily bit her lip. "The doctors say there's a special treatment," she said. "A better one. But it's really expensive. My parents, they can't afford it. Our insurance doesn't cover all of it. They're already selling things from our house. We don't know what to do." Her voice broke on the last word. Keanu felt a tightness in his chest. He had seen pain in movies, but this was different. This was real. This was a real sister, a real boy, and real fear. He asked more questions gently. How old was Jake? What hospital was he in? Was he scared? What did he like? Emily told him Jake loved comic books, space, and toy cars. She said he was still smiling, still trying to make jokes for the nurses. "He sounds like a brave kid," Keanu said. "He is," Emily whispered. "But I'm scared we'll lose him. And we don't have enough money. Every bill feels like another mountain." Just then a voice called, "Keanu, we're ready for you." The moment was broken. The crew was waiting. Keanu had to go back to the bright lights and cameras. He gave Emily a small nod. "Thank you for telling me about Jake," he said. "I'm glad I got to hear about him." Emily tried to smile, but her heart felt heavy. She wondered why she had told all that to a man she didn't really know. Maybe because he had asked with real care. Maybe because it felt good to say the words out loud. As Keanu walked back to the set, his steps were slower. The script in his hand felt less important. A thought formed quietly in his mind, like a seed being planted. There had to be something more he could do. What would you do if you had the power to change a life with one choice? Shooting continued all afternoon. Keanu fought bad guys, jumped, rolled, and repeated the same scenes again and again. He did his job with his usual focus, but his mind kept drifting back to Emily's trembling voice and the picture of a 10-year-old boy in a hospital bed. At lunch, he sat alone at a corner table. His assistant came over with a stack of papers and a tablet, talking about schedules and interviews. Keanu listened, nodded, and signed what he needed to sign. When the assistant was done, Keanu spoke in a low voice. "Can you help me with something else?" he asked. Of course, the assistant replied. Keanu leaned closer. I need to know how to pay a hospital bill. For someone else. And I want it to be anonymous. The assistant blinked in surprise. This was not the first time Keanu had done something kind, but it was the first time he had asked for something like this so suddenly, right in the middle of a workday. Who is it for? The assistant asked. Keanu didn't want to share too many details. A crew member's little brother, he said quietly. He has cancer. His family can't afford the treatment. I want to cover the cost. All of it. The assistant was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. We'll need the hospital's name, they said, and his full name if you have it. Keanu remembered the hospital Emily had mentioned. He had listened carefully. He repeated it now. He also asked the assistant to find out the rest in a very delicate way, so Emily wouldn't be embarrassed or scared. And one more thing, Keanu added. They must not know it's from me. Not the family, not the hospital staff. No one. Just put it as a private donation. His assistant frowned a little. You really don't want them to know? Keanu shook his head. This isn't about me. It's about the kid. He thought for a moment and added, almost shyly. People already think I'm some kind of hero in the movies. That's enough attention. This is just between us and them. Quiet. The assistant gave a small smile. Okay, they said. I'll make some calls. While Keanu went back to filming, wheels started to turn behind the scenes. Phone calls were made, bills were checked, and numbers were added up. The amount was large, larger than most people would ever see at one time. When the payment went through, a note showed up in the hospital's system. Paid in full by private donor. No name. No camera. No red carpet. Just a quiet line in a computer. And somewhere in that hospital, a boy named Jake slept a little easier, though he did not yet know that his future had just been changed. What if one kind act didn't just help one child, but started something much bigger? A week later, Emily came back to the set with a different look on her face. Her eyes were still tired, but there was a glow in them now, like a tiny light had turned on. At lunch, Keanu saw her sitting on a crate, looking at her phone, shaking her head in disbelief. She kept rereading a message. He walked over, not wanting to intrude, but curious. Hey, he said softly. How's Jake? Emily looked up. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were happy tears. The hospital called, she said. They set our bill. Those huge numbers we were afraid of, it's all been paid. Everything. Even the new treatment. They said a private donor helped us. We don't know who. We have no idea. Keanu felt warmth spread through his chest. He tried to keep his face calm and casual. That's really good news, he said. I'm glad. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes with a small laugh. It feels like a miracle, she whispered. We were so scared. My mom cried for hours, but in a good way this time. Jake said, maybe it was a superhero. Keanu smiled. He sounds like a smart kid. That evening, after shooting ended, Keanu sat quietly in his trailer. He thought about the other kids in that cancer ward. Jake was just one of many. If one family had such a heavy burden, what about the others? He remembered Emily telling him about the room full of children with fur lines attached to their arms. About parents sleeping in chairs. About nurses doing their best with limited resources. What about them? He whispered to himself. That question stayed with him for days. Soon, he asked his assistant to contact the hospital again. This time, the request was bigger, bolder. He wanted to know if there were other children who needed help with treatment bills. Children whose parents were struggling. Children who might have to stop treatment because of money. The answer was yes. There were many. Together with the hospital, Keanu set up a special fund. The staff would handle the details and the paperwork. Keanu would supply the money. The rule was simple. Help the kids who needed it most and never reveal his name. The hospital agreed. Over the next months, whenever Keanu got paid for a big role or a new project, a quiet part of that money went into the fund. Bills were cleared. Surgeries were paid. Families who had been crushed by fear suddenly got phone calls that began with the words, "We have some good news." Some families fell to their knees in relief. Some hugged their children and laughed through their tears. They all asked who had helped them. The answer was always the same: a private donor. In one small ward, children who didn't know each other's full stories now shared something invisible, something beautiful. They were being carried, secretly, by the kindness of a man they had never met. Can a list of names become a chain of miracles? The fund kept growing quietly. No press releases, no public announcements, no photos with big checks. The hospital simply knew there was a donor who cared deeply about kids with cancer. One day, the head nurse of the children's ward printed out a list for a special meeting. On that paper were 12 names. 12 children who had received full or major support from the secret fund. Each name had a short note next to it. Jake, leukemia. New treatment approved and paid. Amira, brain tumor. Surgery covered. Toby, lymphoma. Medicine and extra tests funded. Lena, bone cancer. Travel and treatment costs paid. Marco, Sarah, Fatima, Leo, Hannah, Yusuf, Anna, Ravi. 12 lives. 12 families who had been on the edge of despair. The hospital staff sat around a table, holding that list like it was something holy. They didn't know who the donor was. They only knew that, thanks to this person, they did not have to say no as often. They could say, "We will find a way. You are not alone." Back on set, Keanu received short reports now and then. Nothing too detailed, just updates. The fund has helped 12 children so far. Some are in remission. Some are still fighting, but their families are stable financially. He kept each update in a folder, never showing it to anyone else. Sometimes between film shoots, he would sit alone and read the names. He whispered them slowly, as if saying a prayer. Jake, Amira, Toby. He did not know their faces, but their names felt important. Real. More real than the names he played in movies. Years passed. Movies came and went. People cheered his performances, shouted his name at premieres, and asked for photos. They talked about his roles, his stunts, his kindness in small moments, like giving up his seat on the subway or talking respectfully to fans. But no one knew about the secret list of 12. No one knew about the quiet bills paid in the background. For Keanu, that was the way he wanted it. He believed that kindness did not always need a spotlight. It could live in the shadows, like a gentle hand on someone's shoulder in the dark. It could be strong and silent at the same time. Still, the list of names stayed in his mind. He didn't know that, one day, one of those 12 children would grow up. That one of them would decide to go looking for the truth. And that the truth would lead straight back to him. What if you discovered your life was saved by someone you never even met? 10 years later, a young man named Jake sat in a small coffee shop not far from the same hospital. He was 20 years old now. His hair was thick and messy. A thin scar on his arm was the only clear sign of the battles he had once fought inside his tiny body. Jake was a university student, studying to become a nurse. He wanted to help kids like he used to be. Kids who lay in hospital beds, scared and tired, staring at white ceilings and blinking machines. But there was something else on his mind today. He was meeting someone important, an old nurse from the children's ward, Nurse Carla. She had looked after him when he was sick. She had told him silly jokes and brought him stickers. Now she was retired, but Jake had asked to see her. When she walked in, he recognized her right away, even though her hair was grayer and she moved a bit slower. They hugged, and for a moment, Jake felt like a little boy again. "It's so good to see you, Jake," Nurse Carla said warmly. "Look at you. All grown up." They sat down, and after some small talk, Jake's face became more serious. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "Something I've wondered about for years." Nurse Carla watched him carefully. "Go on," she said. "When I was 10, Jake began, my parents were terrified about the treatment bills. I remember whispers, late-night phone calls, crying. And then, suddenly, the hospital told us the bills were paid. They said there was a private donor. But they never said who." He looked at her with bright, searching eyes. "I've always wanted to know," he said. "Who helped us? Who gave me a second chance?" Nurse Carla sighed softly. For a long moment, she stared at her hands, thinking. There were rules about privacy and donors. But so many years had passed. And something in Jake's eyes told her that this was not just curiosity. It was a deep need to understand his own story. "You were not the only one helped," she said slowly. "There were others. A total of 12 children, if I remember right." 12, Jake whispered. "Like a group of us?" She nodded. "We used to call you the Secret 12, just among some of the staff. Because one donor helped all of you. We never used their name in the files. It was always private donor, or anonymous." Jake swallowed. "But you know who it was, don't you?" Nurse Carla looked into his eyes. Then she nodded once. "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." Jake leaned forward, heart racing. His hands were shaking just a little. "Please," he said. "I need to know. My whole life, I've wanted to thank them." Nurse Carla took a deep breath. "The person who paid for your treatment," she said, and for the others was an actor. Jake blinked. An actor? Yes, she said. A quiet one. Gentle. He didn't want credit. He didn't want his name on anything. But someone in the administration had to know his identity for the donations. I found out by accident, and I kept it to myself for a long time. She looked at Jake carefully. His name, she said slowly, was Keanu Reeves. How do you thank a stranger who never wanted to be found? Jake sat very still. Keanu Reeves? He repeated, as if trying the name on his tongue for the first time. Nurse Carla nodded. The movie star, she confirmed. He was filming in the city back then. Somehow, he heard about the children's ward and the struggles of the families. He set up a fund for you and 11 other kids. Jake leaned back in his chair, feeling dizzy. He had seen Keanu Reeves in movies, of course. The calm hero. The brave fighter. The quiet man with sad eyes. But he had never imagined that this famous actor had reached into his life in such a huge way. He saved my life, Jake whispered. And I didn't even know. His heart pounded. He felt grateful, amazed, and confused all at once. Why would such a big star care about kids he didn't even know? Why had he kept it secret? Nurse Carla put a gentle hand on his arm. Jake, I'm telling you this because you're old enough now, and because I can see that it matters to you. But remember, he chose to stay hidden. So if you go looking, do it with respect. Jake nodded slowly. I will, he said. I don't want to cause trouble. I need to say thank you. Even if it's only in a letter he never reads. That night, at home, Jake opened his laptop. He started to search Keanu Reeves' charity and Keanu Reeves' hospital donations. He found story after story of quiet kindness. Giving up his seat, helping crew members, donating money to hospitals and cancer research. The more he read, the more real it seemed. This is the kind of person who would do it, Jake thought. He decided to write a letter. Dear Mr. Reeves, you don't know me, but you saved my life. He wrote about being 10 years old, about the fear, about the sudden relief when the hospital told his family their bill was paid. He wrote about how he grew up, about his wish to become a nurse, and about learning the truth from Nurse Carla. He ended the letter with simple words. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for choosing all 12 of us. Then came the hardest part, how to send it. He didn't have a direct address, of course. So he searched online for Keanu's agent and fan mail addresses. He found one for a talent agency. It seemed like a small chance, but it was something. He printed the letter, signed it, and held it to his chest for a long moment. Then he placed it in an envelope, wrote the address carefully, and mailed it. As the letter slipped from his fingers into the postbox, Jake whispered, Please find him. He had no idea if it ever would. But out there in the world, the story of the Secret 12 was about to cross paths with the man in the black coat once more. What happens when a ghost from your past knocks gently on your door? Some weeks later, in a different city, Keanu Reeves sat at a small wooden table in his home. The morning light came through the window. There was a stack of mail in front of him, scripts, invitations, and fan letters. He liked reading fan letters when he had time. They reminded him of why movies mattered to people, how stories could touch hearts. He opened them one by one. Some were funny. Some were simple. Some were long and emotional. He read them all carefully, treating each one with respect. Near the bottom of the pile, he found an envelope with slightly uneven handwriting. It was addressed through his talent agency. On the back, there was a small drawing of a star and a smiley face. He opened it. Dear Mr. Reeves, you don't know me, but you saved my life. As his eyes moved across the page, his breath slowed. He read about a boy named Jake. He read about a hospital ward he had tried so hard to forget, not because it was bad, but because it was private. It was a secret corner of his heart. He read about the fear of a 10-year-old, the joy of a family who got a call they never expected, and a nurse who had kept a quiet secret for years. He read about the Secret 12, a name he had never heard but that made his throat tighten. By the time he reached the end, his eyes were wet. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for choosing all 12 of us. Keanu put the letter down and sat in silence. He remembered Emily's shaking hands. He remembered the first phone call to the hospital. He remembered reading those names on the list. He had not thought any of them would ever know who he was. That was the point, after all. And yet, here was Jake. Not angry. Not demanding. Just saying thank you. Keanu picked up the letter again and read it a second time slower. He felt something shift inside him, a mix of sadness, warmth, and quiet pride. He did not do those things to be seen. But it still meant something to know that, for at least one person, the truth had brought peace. He didn't know if he should write back. If he replied, the secret would be more real. It would become a story that could spread. People might talk. The quiet magic might turn into loud noise. But if he didn't reply, would Jake feel ignored? Would the boy who lived because of his help wonder if his words had vanished into a black hole? Keanu looked out the window at the sky. He thought of 12 children fighting for their lives. He thought of how many people had helped him in his own life when he was lost and hurting. Maybe just this once, the quiet donor could whisper back. He took a deep breath, pulled a piece of paper toward him, and picked up a pen. How would you feel if your greatest secret hero finally spoke your name? Jake had almost given up hope that his letter would reach Keanu Reeves. Weeks had passed, then more weeks. Life went on. He went to his classes, studied for exams, and did his part-time job at the campus clinic. Still, every time he passed the mailboxes in his building, his heart fluttered a little. One evening, after a long day of studying, he opened his mailbox with tired eyes. Inside was a single envelope with no return address, but with his name written in neat, careful handwriting. His heart jumped. He took the envelope upstairs, hands shaking. He sat on his bed and just stared at it for a full minute before finally opening it. Inside was a short letter. Dear Jake, thank you for your beautiful letter. Jake's eyes widened. The signature at the bottom was simple but clear. Keanu Reeves. For a moment, Jake just held the paper, his throat tight. He read the letter slowly. Keanu wrote that he was glad Jake was still here, and that he was proud to hear Jake wanted to become a nurse. He said he remembered that hospital and the brave children fighting there. He mentioned that he had never expected any of them to know who he was. He wrote, I didn't choose you because of who you were. I chose you because you were there, and you needed help. If I had known you back then, I'm sure I would have liked you a lot. You sound like a strong and kind person. He also said something that made Jake's eyes fill with tears. Sometimes the world is loud with bad news and quiet about kindness. I always felt that real kindness doesn't need a spotlight. But hearing from you today is like a small light shining back. So thank you, Jake, for this light. At the end, Keanu added a simple line. Please don't feel you owe me anything. Just live well. Be kind. That will be more than enough thanks for me. No fancy words. No big promises. Just a quiet message from one human being to another. Jake pressed the letter to his chest. He felt as if a circle had closed. His life, which had been saved in secret, now had a visible thread tying it back to the person who had helped him. He thought about telling the whole world. He thought about posting a photo of the letter online, sharing the story of the secret 12. But then he remembered what Nurse Carla had said, and he remembered the modest tone of Keanu's words. Real kindness doesn't need a spotlight. Jake decided to do something else instead. He opened his laptop and started writing, but not a social media post. He began writing a story, not about a famous actor, but about a quiet stranger who helped children from the shadows. About a list of 12 names. About hope rising in hospital rooms. He didn't use Keanu's name. He changed the details. He made it a story that anyone could read and feel inspired by, without turning a private act into public noise. He would let the kindness spread without exposing its source. As he typed, he smiled to himself. Somewhere out there, the real man in the black coat was living his life, still quietly helping others. And Jake, the boy who lived, was finally finding his own way to pass the light on. What if the greatest stories are the ones that teach us how to be kind when no one is watching? Years later, Jake was no longer just a student. He was Nurse Jake now, walking the halls of the same hospital where he had once been a patient. The children's ward still smelled of disinfectant and hope. The walls were brighter now, painted with colorful murals. He knew what it felt like to lie in those beds. He knew the fear of waiting for test results, the sting of needles, the sound of quiet crying at night. But he also knew something else. He knew that somewhere out there were people willing to help, even from far away. Even in secret. One day, Jake stood at the nurse's station, checking charts. A young mother approached him, eyes red from crying. Her child needed an expensive treatment, and she was terrified. Jake listened to her story, just as Keanu had once listened to Emily. Later that week, the hospital again received a donation. Not from Keanu this time, but from a new fund that Jake and a few others had started. A small charity to help struggling families in the ward. It wasn't huge yet. It didn't have movie star money behind it. But it was something. Jake had named it the 12 Lights Fund. He never explained the name to anyone who didn't ask deeply. To most people, it was just a nice title. But to Jake, it was a promise. A promise to remember the secret gift that had saved him, and to keep that chain of kindness going. In another part of the world, Keanu Reeves was on another set, wearing another costume for another movie. He still walked quietly, still talked kindly to crew members, still listened more than he spoke. Maybe he still gave in secret. Maybe in different ways now, through different paths and different hearts. The world would never know all the details. But somewhere in a file there was still a list of 12 names. And scattered across the world, those names now belonged to grown-ups, teachers, artists, parents, nurses. People who had been given a second chance, and were using it to shine their own light. The story of Keanu Reeves secretly paying for 12 kids' cancer treatment would never be told fully in the news. There would be no big headlines, no loud praise. Just whispers, memories, and quiet letters. Yet the truth lived on in every life that had been changed. In every smile of a child whose parents got the phone call that their bill was paid in full. In every act of kindness those 12 carried forward. And that's the most powerful part of the story. Kindness does not always wear a cape. It does not always stand on a stage. Sometimes it walks in a black coat, listening softly. Sometimes it hides behind the words private donor on a hospital screen. Sometimes it lives in you. Because the secret is this. We don't have to be famous to be someone's hidden hero. We just have to care, even when no one is watching.